The train station felt too quiet for a Friday night. Annalise Harper stood near a row of metal seats, her suitcase upright beside her, one hand wrapped around her phone. She had already checked the time 3 times in less than a minute. The screen hadn't changed. Still early. She didn't like being early. It gave her too much space to think. Cold air slipped in every time the glass doors opened, brushing her cheeks and tugging at her scarf. Outside, snow drifted lazily under the bright platform lights. Inside, travelers moved in quick lines, parents guiding children, business travelers tapping at laptops, couples leaning close. Annalise felt separate from all of them. Chicago was behind her for the weekend. Toronto waited ahead. The trip was supposed to feel freeing. Instead, her chest felt tight, as if she had packed too many emotions into one small bag. Her phone buzzed. Train delayed 15 minutes. She closed her eyes and sighed. Of course. She leaned back against a column and watched people pass, wondering why she had chosen to travel alone when everything in her life already felt so unsettled. 3 months since the breakup. 3 months of learning how to cook for one, sleep on one side of the bed, stop reaching for a phone that no longer buzzed at night. She was still learning. Looks like we're both stuck. The voice startled her. She opened her eyes. A man stood a few steps away, holding a coffee cup and a folded boarding pass. He looked about her age, early 30s, dark hair, thoughtful eyes. His coat was neat but worn, the kind that suggested years of winter use. Yeah, she said. Seems that way. He lifted the cup slightly. I was hoping caffeine would save me from this weather. It failed. A small smile slipped out before she could stop it. I think the snow always wins. Every time. He hesitated, then offered his hand. Ethan. She shook it. Annalise. His hand was warm, steady. The touch lasted only a second, but it lingered in her mind longer than it should have. They stood side by side, watching the departure board glow overhead. So, Ethan said, nodding toward her suitcase, running toward something, or away from it. She blinked at him, surprised by the question. Is that your go-to line for strangers? He smiled. Only the honest ones. She considered lying. Saying just a vacation. Something light. Instead, she shrugged. A little of both. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. That's usually the answer. An announcement echoed through the station about the delay. A ripple of quiet frustration passed through the crowd. Ethan glanced at the empty seat nearby. Mind if I sit? Go ahead. They took places on the cold metal bench, coats brushing. For a moment, neither spoke. Annalise didn't mind. She noticed the way he watched the snow outside instead of his phone. The way he tapped his fingers lightly against the cup, like he was following a tune only he could hear. You headed to Toronto too? She asked. He looked at her, surprised. Yeah. Her eyebrows lifted. Same train? Looks like it. Something about that made her heart flicker, small, quick, unexpected. She shifted her scarf. What brings you there? My sister, he said. She thinks I need to stop working so much. Do you? He gave a quiet laugh. Probably. She smiled. For the first time that night, the station didn't feel quite so cold. She didn't know it yet, but this delay, this random pause in her careful, quiet life, was already changing the direction of her weekend. And maybe more than that, the train finally arrived, and Annalise and Ethan stepped aboard, finding seats across from each other. The carriage smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, and the soft hum of the train on the tracks filled the gaps between passengers. They settled in quickly, both carrying the quiet relief of having someone to share the weight with. So, Ethan said, leaning back slightly, Toronto or Chicago? Toronto, she said, shrugging. Just a quick trip. Same, he replied, raising an eyebrow. Visiting family? My sister, she said. Or, trying to escape life for a couple of days. She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to surprise her as much as him. Ethan nodded knowingly. I get that. They fell into a rhythm immediately, the kind of conversation strangers sometimes slip into when they're the only two awake in the quiet of a moving train. Music, books, favorite movies, they traded details like old friends catching up. He told her about his childhood in Vermont, about long hikes and snowstorms and the little diner where he worked after school. She shared her own stories, small adventures in Chicago, lakeside afternoons she missed, the cafes she wandered through when life felt too heavy. You seem like someone who notices things, he said at one point, watching her eyes follow the passing lights. Like sunsets, small details that most people overlook. Annalise blinked. I do notice. But most of the time, no one else does. He gave a half smile, thoughtful. Maybe that's why we're talking. We both notice. The train slowed as it left the city behind. Outside, darkness stretched, broken only by streaks of snow lit by passing streetlights. Inside, they spoke softer now, voices low and careful. Do you ever wonder, Ethan asked, how many people pass through your life without leaving a mark, without changing anything? Yes, she whispered, almost to herself. And sometimes you realize too late that someone mattered more than you thought. He nodded, his gaze steady. Exactly that. Too late. The quiet between them was comfortable, the kind that makes strangers feel like they've known each other longer than they have. She noticed the way he absent-mindedly tapped his fingers on his coffee cup. She noticed how his eyes softened when he laughed. She noticed how easy it felt to breathe next to him. She didn't want the conversation to end. The conductor announced the next major stop, and the carriage began to stir. Passengers stretched, yawned, and checked their phones. Annalise felt a small panic she didn't expect. This connection, they hadn't exchanged numbers, but the words they had shared felt heavy and real. Ethan glanced at the announcement board, then back at her. Looks like we're on the same stop, he said quietly. Her stomach fluttered. Of course we are, she thought. The train picked up speed again, and the lights blurred past the window. They spoke less now, letting the rhythm of the train carry them. Words had become unnecessary. A look, a small smile, a shared laugh, these were enough. She realized something. It was dangerous in a gentle way. Not reckless, not impulsive. But there was a pull she couldn't explain. Something in the way they fit together in that fleeting moment, a calm in the middle of chaos. Time felt strange. Outside the window, the world was cold and distant. Inside the carriage, everything was immediate, pressing, alive. Annalise thought about her life back in Chicago, the plans she had, the heartbreak she was still carrying. And then she thought about Ethan, the stranger who felt like he could understand it all, the one who didn't judge, the one who made her laugh even as her chest tightened. When the train slowed again, approaching the next stop, she felt a sudden weight. She didn't want this to be just a story to tell later, a fleeting moment lost in memory. She wanted more, though she didn't know what that more could be. Ethan caught her eye and smiled faintly, a question in his gaze. Annalise's heart answered before her mind could. Maybe some nights change everything. And in that moment, she wasn't sure if she wanted to get off the train at all. The train hummed steadily as night deepened, the lights outside fading into long streaks of darkness broken only by occasional towns or glowing highways. Inside, Annalise and Ethan remained across from each other, the space between them small but charged with something neither could name yet. They talked, quietly at first, about easy things, the books they loved, songs that stuck in their heads, movies that made them laugh until their sides hurt. Each story revealed little pieces of themselves, fragments that rarely left their own homes or hearts. Ethan spoke of his Vermont childhood with a kind of fondness that made it easy to picture him walking along snow-laden streets, coffee in hand, his sister's laughter nearby. Annalise described Chicago differently, its noise, its energy, and the quiet corners she'd found along the river where she could be alone with her thoughts. You have a way of seeing the world, Ethan said suddenly, his voice quieter than usual. You notice things most people walk past without thinking. Annalise felt heat rise to her cheeks. Maybe, she said, unsure why it mattered so much to hear it from him. The train rocked gently, the rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and calming. Outside, the snow fell thicker, swirling in the glow of the train lights. Inside, the carriage seemed to shrink, creating a space where only they existed. You ever think about how life is made of tiny moments? Ethan asked, staring at his coffee cup. Like most people walk past, miss them entirely, and then wonder later why nothing feels right? Yes, she whispered, almost breathless. All the time. It's like, if you notice the wrong things, or the right ones too late, you miss something that could change everything. He looked up at her, eyes holding hers for a long beat. The kind of look that says, I understand you more than anyone else right now. Silence followed, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, almost sacred. Later, they laughed about small things, childhood memories, embarrassing moments at work, failed attempts at cooking. Each laugh eased some tension neither realized they carried, some unspoken heaviness they had both brought onto the train. When the train slowed for a minor station, passengers stirred, stretching, checking watches. Annalise felt a tiny pang, a nervous twist in her stomach. The thought that the conversation might end suddenly, that the connection could vanish in a few steps, made her chest tighten. You'll get off there too? She asked, though she knew the answer. Yeah, he said. My sister's in the next town. Her heart skipped, though she tried not to show it. Mine too, she admitted quietly. They shared a small, knowing smile. No one needed to explain the strange luck, or fate, that had placed them on the same train, heading to the same place at the same time. The train moved again, the dark landscape outside stretching endlessly. Words became softer now, slower, more thoughtful. They didn't need to fill every pause, the hum of the tracks, the soft shuffle of other passengers, even the distant sound of the conductor's voice, provided its own rhythm. Annalise noticed him more, how his eyes softened when he smiled, how his hands moved lightly over the bag in his lap, how his voice carried a calm she hadn't felt in months. She realized she didn't want this moment to end, didn't want the train to stop, didn't want the snow outside to remind her the real world was waiting. Ethan's eyes met hers again, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a spark, a quiet understanding that this night might matter more than either wanted to admit. I don't know why this feels different, Annalise said finally, almost to herself. Maybe it's supposed to, he replied, his voice soft but certain. The train's lights reflected in the window beside them, streaking over their faces. Outside, the snow fell heavier, thickening with each mile. Inside, the warmth between them grew, not physical, but something stronger, something that made time slow, even as the train raced toward its next stop. For the first time in months, Annalise felt the kind of hope she had almost forgotten. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and insistent, like a heartbeat she could trust. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know what decisions awaited her when the train doors opened. But in that moment, she knew this night was different. This night was theirs. And maybe, just maybe, it could change everything. The train slowed, its rhythmic hum turning into a steady whistle as it approached the Toronto station. Annalise tightened her scarf around her neck and shifted her bag on her shoulder. Across from her, Ethan adjusted his coat, his eyes flicking briefly to the window and then back to her. The air in the carriage felt heavier now, charged with something neither had said but both understood. The doors hissed open, and cold air rushed in. Snow swirled along the platform, catching in the bright lights like tiny stars falling. Passengers rose, gathering their belongings, moving quickly toward the exits. Annalise and Ethan stayed seated for a moment longer, neither wanting to be the first to leave the small cocoon they had built on the moving train. Well, Ethan said quietly, this is where strangers usually say goodbye. Annalise looked at him, her heart tightening in a way she hadn't expected. She wanted to laugh, to brush it off, but the thought of leaving him behind, of stepping onto the platform alone, made her chest ache. I wasn't planning on meeting anyone tonight, she said, the words soft, almost fragile. Neither was I, he admitted. They rose at the same time, their movements almost in sync. The snow crunched under their shoes as they stepped onto the platform, the cold biting at their cheeks. Their breath hung in little clouds between them, and for a moment, the world outside the train seemed distant, unimportant. "I live in Boston," Ethan said, almost reluctantly. "Chicago," she replied, keeping her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly from the cold, "and maybe something else. Not close. Not simple." But neither of them pulled back. "I was hoping you'd say yes," she added before he could speak again, surprising herself with her boldness. "Say yes?" he asked, curiosity and hope mixed in his voice. "To keep this," she said, gesturing vaguely between them. "Not just tonight. Maybe see each other again." Ethan's gaze softened, and he smiled slowly. It was the kind of smile that held relief, joy, and something unspoken that made her heart race. "I was hoping you'd say that," he whispered. They exchanged numbers, fingers brushing lightly when she handed him her phone. The touch was brief, electric, and lingered longer in memory than in reality. Neither pulled away too quickly. Neither wanted the moment to end. The snow fell heavier, thickening around them. Streetlights reflected off the wet platform, making the flakes sparkle. Annalise felt the weight of her life back home, the uncertainty of her plans, the careful boundaries she had built around her heart. And then she looked at Ethan, the stranger who didn't feel like a stranger anymore, and realized she wanted to take a risk, to step into something unknown but real. "Annalise?" Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes?" "This might sound ridiculous," he said, hesitation in his tone, "but I think this is one of those nights people remember." Her chest tightened. She knew, without a doubt, he was right. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It wasn't just a delayed train or a random meeting. It was something rare, fragile, and powerful. "I think so too," she admitted. The train doors closed behind them, a faint whistle marking the end of the journey inside the carriage but not the journey that had begun between them. They walked side by side on the platform, the snow swirling around their feet, two strangers now connected by more than coincidence. Neither knew what the next days would bring, how often they would see each other, or if this spark would grow into something lasting. All they knew was that this night mattered. That their decision to speak, to stay, to hope, had changed the direction of their lives. Annalise felt the first real warmth in months, not from her coat, not from the train, but from the simple truth that sometimes, one night, two strangers, and a choice could alter everything. And as they stepped toward the city, side by side, neither looked back, because neither needed to. The path ahead was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long while, it felt alive. It felt possible. And it was theirs.